Ohio State spent the first week of the transfer portal losing a bunch of players, and now it seems like they're starting to add a bunch of players as they're one of the programs that's starting to get active in week 2. At the time that we're recording this, Ohio State has landed 9 people in the portal: quarterback Justin Martin, defensive lineman John Walker, linebacker Christian Allegrio, tight end Mason Williams, wide receiver Devin McEwen, safeties Terry Moore and Earl Little Jr., long snapper Dalton Riggs. So they got one of the specialists checked off. I know there's another one that people wanted to get. They don't have that one yet. And then tight end Hunter Welsing. These are guys from Northwestern, Florida State, UCF, Duke, UTSA, Ohio, and Wisconsin. Stefan, what do we think so far? What do we take away from the 9 guys Ohio State has added through the transfer portal in terms of what this means in terms of their approach with this portal and just like your overall thoughts on some of these guys?
Yeah, it's turning into a pretty good group so far. Obviously, ways to go and maybe some positions of need to more specifically address. But, if you're an Ohio State fan, I know losing, more than 25 guys is always a scary thought. But now that you're seeing some of these guys trickling in, I think you're seeing maybe what some of the approach is. And I think the biggest thing you probably take away, especially with the 2 transfers they just landed, is this is a team that's getting older, right? Like they're going to get guys who have produced, Earl Little and Terry Moore were both guys who were all ACC, safeties, right? Moore a couple of years ago because he missed the 2025 season with injury. But Little this past year was, third team all ACC selection down at Florida State. So like you're seeing this is what the approach is of, the guys that they're losing. It's scary because you see, 4-star, 5-star next to their name, and you're wondering, man, that's a lot of potential walking out the door. I think Fahim Delane is probably the first guy you point to. You say, man, there's a really talented safety who was maybe going to step up and, at the very least compete for a starting role. And I think between you and I think we'd probably say he would have had a starting role going into the 2026 season. It's uneasy when you see a guy like that leave, but then you see what they're bringing in, guys that have, you think Fahim Delane could be an all Big Ten caliber player. Okay, let's go bring in guys who have been all, I know ACC isn't quite the Big Ten, but still, it's still a power conference, and they're all
ACC beat the Big Ten this year. ACC did beat the Big Ten, so
there you go. So like that's high caliber players, right? So you're getting in good proven production in spots where sure maybe there was a talented guy on paper stepping in, but you in this era of college football, I think we're seeing the value of experience. I think Allegro coming in from Wisconsin. Yeah, Riley Pettijohn is really exciting. Peyton Pierce is really exciting. Okay, here's another guy to add to our room who's played Big Ten football, right? Played a lot of Big Ten football, played a lot of snaps. So I think that's kind of the approach you're seeing. And now as players are trickling in, I think you maybe sit back and say, okay, yeah, losing a ton of guys is never fun when it's happening, but you can see what the approach is here.
And it is tough, right? Because you're losing potential, but you're also losing guys that this fan base has been attached to for a long time, going back to the days as a recruit. And so I understand when that was happening first and this was maybe not being paired with it, you were freaking out of what the heck is going on with the program. We're losing a bunch of guys, but also why are we not active in the portal the way we saw Indiana and we saw some other teams around the country, be a little bit more active. Okay, well, Notre Dame just landed its first 2 players, I think, on Monday, and they were highly rated guys, right? Georgia's starting to get active. Texas landed a couple guys over the weekend. Oregon just added a quarterback in Dylan Raiola. Ohio State has been in line with that, where it almost seems like the first week of the portal was, okay, let's see what we lose. Let's see what we need. Let's go evaluate what we need and who we need to get it from, and then we can start signing off of these guys. John Walker was the first to hop on board. I think he's an intriguing guy because you're losing Caden McDonald. You have to replace that somehow. You can't replace Big Ten defensive lineman of the year, potential first-round draft pick with a guy that you think, but you don't have enough to know. Not in a world where you're putting the financial investment into these guys. And so what did they do? Okay, they let some guys like not John Walker, but Jarquez Carter walk, Dominic Kirks and Eric Mensah walk, and they replaced that with John Walker, a guy they recruited back in the day, back as a member of the 2023 class. They recruited him hard back then, and obviously they ended up losing out to UCF, but they get him on the back end after he spent 3 years at UCF playing meaningful football in a Power 4 conference. And so now they get to reap the benefits of that. Christian Allegrio, as you just mentioned, he's played a lot of Big Ten football. Was it always winning Big Ten football? No. I mean, it's not his fault that the Luke Fickell era at Wisconsin hasn't necessarily worked out. But at the same time, Luke Fickell knows linebackers, right? So I trust his ability to evaluate a linebacker. I think James Laurinaitis at this point has earned the benefit of the doubt in his ability to evaluate a linebacker. Yeah, Peyton Pierce and Riley Pettijohn's a good top two. What if you made it a top three and you added this guy on top of that? I think that's a great way to go about it. I think they needed tight ends, regardless of what Max Clare is going to do. You've already lost Will Kazmaier to graduation. You've lost Jelani Thurman to the transfer portal. He's now at North Carolina. We'll see what Bennett Christian and the rest of that room does. But I think Keenan Bailey did a good job of offsetting some of those things. And I think he did them while leaving the door open to, we'll see what happens with Max Clare. Well, I mean, maybe by the time you're watching this video, Max Clare's already announced what he's going to do there, but you have to refill your room. And he did that with two guys who have played a decent amount of football. I think the wide receiver position is an intriguing conversation. I feel like I'm just running down all the list of guys, but I'm going to say the same thing, but just like 8 different ways. But yeah, I think this is the right approach until we find structure with college football. That if you're going to pay guys, I'm going to pay a guy that I know can do the job, not a guy that I think can do the job because he has potential. And I think that's the right way to go about this. And the good news is Ohio State's probably not done adding players.
Yeah, I think another thing that you add on top of it, and something that we talk about, a lot. I mean, Indiana's kind of the example for everything right now, just because of what that turnaround was, and now they're playing, for national championship and things like that. And as much as portal and getting older was a big thing for them, coaching and developing is also a huge thing. And I think if you're Ohio State and you see some of these veteran guys at other spots, and you're telling yourself like, okay, that guy was good in the ACC, that guy was good in the Big Ten. You want that next step from that player, right? I think Ryan Day looks at his staff and says, I trust James Laurinaitis to get that next little bit out of this linebacker. I trust, Cortez Hankton to get that next little bit out of this wide receiver. So there is still an element to this of just like, you can't go into portal, get a million guys and say, okay, we're fine if your coaches aren't ready to develop them at least a little bit, right? Like at Indiana, they go out and get a bunch of guys from James Madison to come with them. Okay, those are guys that they have been, developing for a while. But even Fernando Mendoza, he comes in, he was good at Cal. You got to take that next step. And Kurt Cignetti knew that the staff he had in place could get that out of a quarterback, get that out of receivers and things of that nature. So there's still an element of coaching that comes into this. You talked about James Laurinaitis getting the benefit of the doubt. I think that's important, right? Because you can look at these guys and say, okay, they haven't quite done it at the Big Ten level. There's maybe still another step for them to take, for the Ohio State to really trust them as a starter on a national championship contending team. That's where coaching still matters, and coaching is a big part of this. So the big thing at Indiana was get older, production over potential, blah, 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 but also really good development and coaching. Ohio State probably feels really good. Ryan Day feels really good about the staff that he has in place. I know there's, an offensive coordinator job to still be filled, but you look at some of these position coaches, especially on defense, right? It was so important for him to keep those guys when Matt Patricia came in, like, hey, I want you to be the coordinator, but I want James Laurinaitis to still be here. I want Tim Wallen, Matt Guerreri, and Larry Johnson still to be here. And that's all still in place for Ohio State. So as you kind of go through this and then they start to add players, you think about that as well. Like, okay, they brought in a guy, he's got potential, he's got production, but there is probably still a little bit of potential that's been, hasn't been tapped into yet. And I think that's where the staff probably feels confident with what they can do with some of these guys coming in from the portal.
There's almost raising the floor a bit, right? And I mean, sometimes when it's potential, it can be an erratic level of a floor, even if you think the ceiling is pretty high. I think if Ryan Day can bank on his position coaches on raising the ceiling a little bit, and they're already starting from a pretty high floor, that's a good place to start, especially when, listen, I mean, you're entering what is probably the last year of Julian Sand as your starting quarterback. It's definitely the last year of Jeremiah Smith as your best player. You got a bunch of old guys on your offensive line who are probably going to be gone after this year. This is not, okay, well, we just had a bunch of good players leave, and now we need to kind of reset here, and it's going to take us a couple of years to, get back to where we need to get to. Now, you have to, bring it now. You can't waste the last year of Jeremiah Smith. Just like last year, you couldn't waste the last year of Carnell Tate. The year before that, you couldn't waste the last year of Emeka Ibuka, and on down the list. We can keep going with all these different things here. They also added Justin Martin, a quarterback who spent time at both UCLA and Maryland. He's not coming here to start. It doesn't really even change the hierarchy of the quarterback situation at all. It's Julian Sands, number 1, Tavian St. Clair's number 2. That's essentially this is a young room. You got to remember, Tavian St. Clair only played 13 snaps last year, and they came against Grambling State, so he hasn't even played football against a FBS team yet, let alone a Power 4 team. And then you got Luke Fahey in the room as an incoming true freshman. So, yeah, you have a returning starting quarterback, but you probably wanted to feel a little bit more at ease with what you had behind him, and so you bring a guy in like Justin Martin, who spent time at UCLA, who spent time backing up Malik Washington last year at Maryland. And so do I think he ends up playing here? Probably not, right? It's more than likely going to go the same way that Tristan Gebbia in 2023 went, and Eli Brickhandler this past season, where this is a guy where he's a veteran in the room that's young and also kind of a break glass if necessary type of situation with Justin Martin. But his value is more in what he's doing behind the scenes in comparison to maybe what he's going to be doing potentially on Saturdays. But with these other guys, Stefan, all these guys so far are expected to have a role this year. Is there a guy that maybe stands out to you in terms of like they need this guy to hit 100% more than maybe any of the other guys?
I think John Walker stands out to me. I like him a lot. What he was able to do at UCF, and you mentioned it earlier when we were talking about him. Just this is a guy that, sure, maybe getting a guy from UCF out of the transfer portal isn't the flashiest thing. Okay, what if Ohio State had signed him in their signing class and he had just been here a couple of years and now was stepping into a starting role, right? Like he's gone to UCF, he got more reps than maybe he would have if he was an Ohio State recruit and was developing behind the scenes. So that feels like a major win for me, where it's you lose Caden McDonald, you lose Tywone Malone, Caden Curry's gone. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, Kenyatta Jackson's announced his decision or not, but like going into 2026. There's a chance that you are again losing your entire starting offensive line, right? Or sorry, defensive line. Mm-hmm. And bringing in a guy who's got, a good bit of experience, but also someone who is talented enough to have been recruited, decently by Ohio State a few years ago, I think is a huge addition to this defense. So I think, based on what they lost at defensive tackle, whether it be the high end or even some of the young guys like Jarquez Carter, who you mentioned, you kind of need John Walker to hit. And I think he will. I think he's a great player. I think he's got the size and athleticism to be really good at that position for Ohio State. So he's probably the one I circle and I say it's hard to overstate how important Caden McDonald was for this Ohio State defense at a position that, doesn't always get all the recognition it deserves. So you go out and get a guy to replace that who's got, some experience under his belt and some talent. There's a high potential there to pair with production. And I think if you're Ohio State, you'd really like if that, that hit the way you expect.
I'm laughing because everything we've done so far, whether videos on YouTube or go check out Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts, get the text 614-350-3315. Go read us at cleveland.com/OSU. It feels like anytime we record something, we're just like, yeah, that's what we think right now. But also we understand that like anything can change at a given moment because like as you're listening to this right now, who knows? Somebody's already done something that we didn't expect for them to do. And it's just funny because that's how erratic college football is. I agree with you. John Walker, it's because of who he's replacing and what his role is. Caden McDonald did all that while technically being undersized, and John Walker seems to fit what Matt Patricia wants as Ohio State continues to evolve itself defensively and maybe be more of a 3-down front, odd front defense. You need big dudes on the interior who can eat up a lot of space. And if Caden McDonald was doing that at like 6'2", 330 pounds. I don't know, a dude who's 6'4", 330 pounds, better be able to do it at the same level. I'm going to go with Terry Moore from Duke just because I think he's a dude. And I mean, he was an all ACC level player in 2024, and then he missed the entire 2025 season with a ACL injury. If he gets back to anything like what he was in 2024 and builds on that, Matt Guerrieri got the best out of Jalen McClain and Lathan Ransom and Caleb Downs the last couple of years here. So if Matt Guerrieri takes what Terry Moore was in 2024, now that he's fully healthy, and he builds on that, and you pair it with Jalen McClain, and then maybe you get a little bit then you get out of Earl Little as that nickel, what you need to get out of him, and then Jermaine Matthews and Devin Sanchez take the necessary steps that we think they should be taking, that's a hell of a secondary for Ohio State. And I know on paper right now, I just said a bunch of ifs in a world where we said ifs or a fifth, we'd all be you-know-what. But just Devin Sanchez is the biggest if of this group, right? Just because he is a second-year guy. He's a 5-star going into a second year and taking a jump up in a role. Everybody else in that secondary is going to have a role similar to what they had the last time they played football. And Terry Moore is the one of that group where I feel like, where's the hidden gem? Where's the guy that, man, the transfer portal is a blessing to a guy like that because he's not stuck at Duke, where he did win the ACC, though. He did win the ACC. So there's that. He's won a conference championship. Listen, there's not a lot of guys on Ohio State football's team in 2026 who can say they won a conference championship. He is one of those guys. But I think he's a dude who just happened to be at Duke. And I think they might have hit on something there. So I'm like really excited to see Terry Moore play football. But the secondary in total, if the guys hit that they are clearly banking on to be their starters, that's a hell of a secondary in a world where maybe as little as 72 hours ago, we were wondering what the heck they were doing in the secondary.
Yeah, I mean, that's a guy who's making plays for Elko, right? Mike Elko, when he was at Duke in that 2024 season. I think also, too, when you look at, his stats, you see 4 interceptions and 2 forced fumbles. And as awesome as Ohio State's defense was in 2025, I think the one thing you lacked was a little bit of that, kind of havoc element to it and creating some turnovers. You probably would have liked to see them create some more turnovers. You get that from a player like him. I think it's a really interesting add to this defense. I'm excited to see, what Matt Patricia does with them.
I can't wait to talk to people again. It's going to be a while, though, until we talk to people. They got to figure out the rest of the roster. 614-350-3315. The portal is still open until Friday. So Ohio State will probably continue to add people, and they'll probably continue to lose people too. It feels like it's March 14th, and we are 13 days into January as people are watching this video right now. It's wow. The season isn't over. This is college sports. This is what we asked. This is not what we asked for, but this is what we got. 614-350-3315. And go listen to Buckeye Talk wherever you find podcasts. Stefan, Steven, talk to you guys later.